Okay, so while the rest of the HR community is undertaking talent management and leveraging their human resource potential, I think what I'd like to do is really stick to the knitting. And the subject that I want to talk about is training needs analysis, or learning needs analysis, or developmental needs analysis, whichever one you prefer to call it. And I don't want to look at a particular technique, I don't want to look at a particular method. What I want to do is be clear about what it's doing, what it should be actually identifying. So what we've got here is the beginning of a graph, and this graph measures the productivity of an individual. And as we go up the graph, it gets higher, and as we get down the graph, it goes lower. So, okay, what we've got here is a particular group that we are looking at, and we are trying to examine the productivity of the individual. And what I've put in here is a line, and this line you can call it the experienced worker standard. It's the expectation or the understanding that we've got that if somebody is engaged in this particular job role or function, this is the level of productivity, the amount of work, the content of the work that they should be involved in, and what they should be accomplishing. Now, if you don't know what it is that somebody should be doing, if we're not clear about what their target output should be, then you're really stuck for identifying a need. Because what the need is quite simply this. Here we have an individual who's doing a job, and if we measure their productivity, as you can see, they fall some way short of the experienced worker standard. And in this particular instance, this shortfall at this moment we can say is a performance gap. In other words, this is what we expect them to do, this is what they actually achieve. Now, at this moment, here's the important thing, it is a performance gap. It is not necessarily an issue that development and learning can address. Because development and learning can actually impact, I think, predominantly on two items and secondarily on a third. Now let me explain what I mean. If the shortfall in this person's performance is because of the absence of knowledge, in other words, they don't have the understanding to be able to do the job. They don't know left from right, top from bottom in relation to the task or the job or the function. Then we can develop that knowledge. We can train, develop, whatever it is. The second thing might be skill. Now, with skill, that's the physical skill, the ability, the competence, if you like, in terms of the undertaking of the task that allows them to do it. You know, it's one thing having knowledge of how to drive a car. It's a quite different thing having the skill to be able to know how much to turn the wheel, how much pressure to apply to the brakes. Those are all physical skills. And those physical skills, I mean, I've just described driving a car. It could be, you know, how do you conduct a performance appraisal? How do you give somebody bad news? That's a physical skill as well as a knowledge one. You know, effective listening skills, good body language, framing of points and questions, so on and so forth. Now, in terms of development and training, we can definitely equip somebody with knowledge and skill. And that's what needs analysis or should be looking at. That's what we're doing, or that's what we should be doing when we identify a need. It's because these knowledge and skills are missing, and that's what the performance should be if this person is equipped with the knowledge and skill. Now, quite frankly, that is not often the case in needs analysis. What is more often and more frequently the case is that the needs analysis is essentially a finger in the wind idea about, we've just promoted them to a supervisor, let's put them on leadership development. Why? Have we established what the gap is in terms of their knowledge and skills? And is there a gap in terms of performance? Now, we might be able to predict a performance gap if this person's not got no background and no lead into the particular function or role that we're recruiting them for. But if somebody is undertaking a job and they are performing it to the effective worker standard, presuming we have got a clear definition of what the effective worker standard is, then I'm really dubious about whether there is a developmental need there. In fact, I'm not dubious, there isn't one in this context. Now, there's one other item that we often place in this area that training can impact on, and that is attitude. I've written that in red simply because I've got some reservations when people have got an attitudinal problem and they are sent or given development in order to turn that attitude round. I think the major influence on somebody's attitude is line management. And if I'm told this person's got an attitudinal problem and I want you to train it out of them, the first question I've got to ask is why have they got that attitude and the problem? And in many cases, it's a failure of management. Now, without doubt, training and development events, be they AE-based or classroom-based, or whatever form, can certainly contribute to positive attitudes. But if that person returns to an environment and a culture where the appropriate and right attitudes are not supported, then they're going to burn up like a rocket coming back in for re-entry. Now, what you will also get on some programs is another individual, and you would have to ask yourself, in this case, this person exceeds the worker standard, quite significantly in fact. What are you doing on the course? And the answer is, they shouldn't be. They exceed the worker standard, they have got the requisite knowledge, skills and attitude, and that training course is not going to do anything. Because if the training course or the developmental program or the E-based event has been focused on trying to get people up to a standard, and that person has reached it and is above it, I would really question whether there's going to be any benefit from it. We can't miss out a third type of individual. This individual, when we look at their performance, once again, falls some way short of the experienced worker standard. And in many organisations, there is an immediate presumption that if there is a performance gap, there is a training issue. That is not always the case. It might well be, in this particular instance, that this individual falls some way short of productivity, but it is not because of an absence of knowledge, skill and attitude. It might be because of an absence of appropriate support mechanisms. It might be a situational problem that person faces. Or it could be, in fact, in some cases, that this individual has got the knowledge, skills and attitude, they just haven't got the ability. When everything is added together, they can't put everything together. And so consequently, there is a shortfall. And in some cases, no amount of training and development is ever going to get this person up to the experienced worker standard. For instance, you could put me under a football coach until the end of time, but I am never ever going to make it as a professional footballer. I just don't have what it takes. And in those instances, sending somebody on a development program or giving them some kind of development program is frankly wasting their time and wasting the organisation's money. And yet it happens every day. So, needs analysis is about identifying what do we expect people to do. It's about identifying what is it that people currently achieve, and then finding out, is the shortfall due to an absence of knowledge, skill or attitude? And if it is, we may well be able to make a contribution by training. If it isn't, don't waste their time or your money.